Well, hi there, everybody. I'm excited to be able to participate in this year's research roundtables. So I want to thank Regent University School of Business and Leadership for inviting me. And I'm excited to present the paper that I put together that I've titled Striving to Thriving, Servant Leadership and Entrepreneurial Growth. So a little bit about me. My name is Joshua Clark. I'm a DSL student here at Regent University. I'm also an adjunct professor where I teach communications at North Idaho College. And so it's been really great to be able to develop here at Regent and be able to put this together. To give a little overview of what today's going to look like, we're going to begin with introducing the 5 stages of small business growth. I present a problem within one of those stages, the problem of letting go, and then give a solution, which I believe will be servant leadership within that, and then looking at how to design an organization to be able to implement that servant leadership through strategy and design. So let's begin with the first stage. First stage is existence. Existence is the infant stage of an organization. As an entrepreneur takes on a new entrepreneurial opportunity, we see that it's in this growth stage of existence. This stage is kind of a sink or swim kind of moment here. It's the takeoff stage. There's a lot going on, and it's just mere survival, which leads into once a little bit of success happens and things start progressing. You maybe have a customer base, you understand what they need, their needs and wants, and how to provide a service or a product for that. You move into the survival stage. Both of these stages are highly involved with the founder. The founder is deeply ingrained within everything. They are the doer of all. They may have a few people working for them, but it's highly under the web of the founder. The next step is the step of success. This is a big leap for a business, and this is where you'll see that moving from just mere survival to a state of success. Here, the organization begins to stabilize more. The organization becomes to grow in size and age, and what we find is that it becomes more complex. Complex in the sense of there are now probably departments that are leading certain types of tasks or needs for the organization. It's starting to spread horizontally. And there's 2 stages within this, the 2 pathways per se that you could take when entering in the success stage. So the first one's going to be the disengagement. The disengagement stage is where an owner decides, okay, they have had enough with this venture and they want to step into other roles. And so they might remove themselves from the organization, giving over that to other people to run. This could be for various reasons. Maybe they want to focus more on like their family or something along those lines. Maybe they get into the political realm, or they want to take on other ventures. But the point of this stage, if you take the success disengagement, it is that, okay, the organization pretty much stays where it's at, keeps progressing where it's going, but the owner starts to take a step back. The growth stage is different. This is where the owner decides, okay, now that we're in here, we're seeing some success, we want to progress towards the takeoff stage, stage number 4. We want to see growth. The organization begins to take on more debt to be able to fund the ventures that needed to be able to take off. Once that has gone and rapid growth is being seen and the organization is continuing to grow and grow, eventually they'll reach the resource maturity. And that's where it begins to settle within that mature organization that is stabilized at this high level and seeing great success. Now, when we look at these stages, there's a key problem within one of those stages, and that's stage number 3. But before we get there, we'll look at what Tim Whitehurst said. So Tim Whitehurst is the CEO of Red Hat. He's also the former CEO of Delta Airlines. And in an interview with Joel Trammell, he stated the following. He said, being a leader and a doer is important in a small company. As you grow, though, the ability to stop doing versus orchestrating is important. I think that's where a lot of companies get into trouble. Small company people can't run big because they can't let go. They can't stop doing. Most big company people can't run a small company because they can't actually do. So there's two aspects here that I want to highlight. There's the doers, the doing, which means the hands-on, nitty-gritty, bootstrapping kind of level of business. And then there's what Whitehurst says here, which is the orchestrating. Orchestrating is more the bigger picture. It's taking a step back. It's guiding. It's leading. It's more of when you think of an orchestra, you have the conductor, and then there's everybody else playing their instruments. And so you're kind of leading, you're bringing these individuals together to work in one cohesive unit, rather than just being the one who's actually playing the instrument. You're now taking the role of being the one who are guiding others who are actually doing the doing. So within stage 3 is where we see the problem that Whitehurst points out, of the letting go. Because in stages 1 and 2, leaders are highly involved. The entrepreneur is highly involved in everything that's going on. They are doing the actual work. But to be able to move into a success stage, you have to take the step back and relinquish that control. The founder needs to take a new identity, which is more of a role of a CEO rather than the hands-on manager. The big problem is most people don't want to make that transition. And that is a very big problem, because if without making that transition, you'll stay within the existence in survival modes. You may progress even backwards. Say you're in a survival mode, you may progress backward to existence. You may move into brief periods of the success stage, but likely without making that transition, you'll fall back into the previous stages. And so to be able to make that success stage, to be able to stabilize more, removing oneself from that doer and being more of the orchestrator is going to be that big step. And the way to do so is to take the role of a servant. Greenhouse pointed out, to be able to move from this within this problem, to be able to move from doer to orchestrator, you need to take the role of a servant. Because what's going to have to happen is you're going to have to bring in other people who are going to take over those roles that you were doing. Experts within their given field, but you need to be able to bring in people that you will be able to lead in a way of serving them, serving their needs, helping them grow and to be leaders themselves and servants of others, so that they can take over the roles that you were doing. No longer is everything on the shoulders of the founder. Now you start to compartmentalize the business. You begin to hire on executives who are going to take over the business functions that once the founder had. And now your role as a servant leader is now to guide them, to help them grow into those positions, to be able to take them on adequately enough. And so Larry Spears pointed out 10 characteristics of servant leadership. And we're not going to look at all 10 right now. We just don't have time. But some big ones are the commitment to people's growth. When you bring on people, whether they're people within the organization already, or you're bringing people on to take on the roles of executives, you're going to need to be able to, you need to commit to their growth, to be able to allow them to grow into those positions, to be autonomous people running their departments. And then by investing in them, by serving them, the hope is that they will be able to serve the others that they are entrusted with leading. As a CEO, founder now, and no longer being the doer, it's going to take a lot of awareness and conceptualization that we see here. The awareness here and conceptualization there. It's going to take the awareness to know that, okay, no longer can I, as the founder, be able to do everything. The business has grown too much. We're now in a place where I can no longer do it all, and so it has to be delegated to other people. You have to have that awareness to be able to step into that position. And then you have the conceptualization to see how all the parts play together. You want to build a servant community in which you bring other people who are servant leaders themselves to take on these functions and to be able to continue to invest not only in the organization, but within the community around them. Now, it's one thing to be a servant leader, but we have to find a way to be able to implement that within the organization. Now that the leader is kind of taking a step back, and not a step back in a negative sense, it's just a step back in a different direction. You're going to be taking on a different role. Your role is now more of the visionary, the strategist of the CEO versus the doer. And so you have to be able to implement servant leadership into the strategy and design. So we see here at the top is servant leadership, but you want to build it into the strategy and design that you have. So the strategy is that you, as the founder, have already probably created a vision for this organization. Now it's just writing it out in a clear vision statement and being able to not only have it created, but to inspire others to latch on to that. You create the strategy. Okay, what are we looking to do and how are we going to do it? And you implement the servant leadership aspects to that. Meaning that this strategy is not only going to be in the benefit of the organization, but all the stakeholders. That means the customers. That means investors. That means employees, leaders, the community in which it's involved with, the cultures that it's involved with. These are all things that need to be considered in the strategy if you're going to be taking on the role of a servant leader. Then get down to the design aspect, and you have to design the structures and the systems to support that. The organizational structure is no longer going to be owner with everybody else underneath. It's now going to be the owner as a CEO with executives underneath that have their own domains in which they are operating in which they are serving the people below them. They're their followers. And so it's important that it's now going to be diversified. It's not just the owner taking on all of that responsibility. It's now each different function. Oh, we're going to have a marketing executive, okay, and then the operations, and then our sales, and so on and so forth. And so that's where you start to see the design aspect. A great way to illustrate this is to look at the Roman Empire versus the Greeks. So the Greeks were a very creative group of people. They were really invested in the arts and philosophy, and they were great thinkers, and they brought forth a lot of wonderful ideas, much of which their train of thought still continues on today. When we look at how they were organized, is each city-state had their own ordinance. They had their own government in which they worked through democracy to be able to implement rules, regulations, and laws that govern their people. But each city-state had their own. They were separate. They were decentralized in a sense. And this is really illustrated within their structures of their gods. When you look at the Greek gods, they each had their own domains in which they ruled. So, for instance, you might have Poseidon, the god of the sea. Or you may have, a god of beauty, a god of war, a god of love. These are all different aspects, but they were spread out. When you look at the temples in which they worship these gods, those gods each had their own temples spread out throughout the lands. Within each one of those areas, they had the temple worshiping a god that kind of resembled their own city-state. They had the characteristic, the values that the people within that city-state had. And they all kind of served their own purpose. You look at the Roman Empire instead, and these are people that began from a humble beginning. But over time, the empire grew and grew and grew into a very powerful force. When you look at the god structure of the Roman Empire, many of the gods resemble the Greek gods. But we see a difference here in how it's organized. You see, in order for a god to be recognized by the Roman Empire, it had to have a home within the Pantheon. The Pantheon was a temple in which all gods resided. It was also known as the home of the gods. And so here is an interesting aspect. You have all these different gods with different domains, but yet they had to reside under one temple. It was centralized. They all had their own separate rule, but it was all centralized under the Roman Empire. And so when we look at this from a design aspect, as organization, from an organizational aspect, we want to see, okay, the reason the Roman Empire ended up overthrowing the Greeks, many historians have attributed that to their organization of their empire. And so we're looking at an organization and from an entrepreneurial aspect. If you are designing it in a centralized way, you have a strategy that's geared towards being a servant organization who has servant leaders. and it's organized in a way, it's designed in a way to be able to support that, and it's all centralized towards that same idea, you'll see great success. And so as a servant leader, you have to not only be able to have the heart of a servant, but you have to be able to also organize the organization to be able to support that. And so I hope this has helped. This is a very interesting topic, but I know that there's probably likely questions. If you have any questions, feel free to email me here. I have my email, and I would love to have a further conversation with anybody. Thank you very much, and I look forward to watching everybody else's. Take care.